In this program, Lou and his guest experts will help you understand and expand your empathy. In doing so, you may discover a side of yourself that you never even knew existed. Now, here is Lou Agosta.
Hi, this is Lou Agosta, and welcome to A Rumor of Empathy. We have got a wide-ranging talk-filled show today. My special guest is Stan Schatt, Dr. Stan Schatt, PhD, who has, I'm going to introduce him now. Stan has had several careers, including Futurist, an executive for many of the world's leading technology market research firms. He's been a police department administrator, a network manager, an autopsy assistant, Telecommunications Department Chairman, and English professor. He's, among other things, an author. His nonfiction works include books on strategies for changing careers for green industry jobs, studies of Michael Connelly and Kurt Vonnegut, and college textbooks on network and data communications, telecommunications, and computer programming. Stan is basically a Renaissance man, and the occasion for our conversation today is he's turned to writing novels, fiction, fantasies, mysteries, and most recently, the paranormal mystery, Silent Partner, a book about sexual identity. Pen L Publishing will release its sequel, A Bullet for the Ghost Whisperer, in November. So that has actually happened. Booktrope has published Alien Love, a science fiction novel that Stan likens to a cross between Casablanca and Star Wars. That just hit in 2015, and is the immediate occasion for my conversation today with Stan Schatt. He's also published, one final note, because it's going to come up, he's also published Extraterrestrial First Contact, a nonfiction study of the impact of first contact. So, Stan, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's really great. So Alien Love, which is what got us initially talking, is, to put in category on it, science fiction, fantasy. What's the premise of this novel?
Well, the premise of this is that our government has not been truthful to us over the years, and that there has been contact. But the premise is also that relations between humanity and extraterrestrials could be a lot more complicated than we think. In science fiction movies, very often it's very clear the aliens are either ultra good or ultra bad. Either they're out to destroy us or they're out to save us. But my premise is that their motivations could be a lot more complicated than we imagine.
Say more about that, if you can.
Yeah, sure. It kind of ties in with a nonfiction, book that I did that you mentioned on the subject. But there's been a lot of thought by scientists over the last few years about a first contact with extraterrestrials, and unfortunately, our history on Earth, in which advanced civilizations, technological civilizations, have encountered more primitive civilizations, has not gone too well for the more primitive side.
Roger that. Yeah, and we're going to talk about that.
So there is concern about that, and some of our leading scientists have speculated that we have to be very careful about a first contact. We have no idea who's coming, and as an example, imagine, if you will, the impact on society if it turns out that the first aliens turn out to be missionaries.
Yes,
some religion that we would find rather bizarre.
I must say I'm already overstimulated and experiencing rapid ideation with this premise. And I want to call out that we had talked about you're doing a reading of an excerpt from Alien Love. And I want to say this is, like you said, I want to give back to you what you just told me. On our own planet, say in 1492, when Western European societies and civilizations encountered other societies, indigenous people, as we describe them, things didn't go that well for the indigenous people. And here we are, and in science fiction movies, when we encounter aliens and extraterrestrials, it's either war, right? Like whatever, battle, aliens. And
Independence Day.
Thank you. That's the one, shoot 'em up. And, and it goes well or it doesn't, but it's basically a war movie. Or, what are the alternatives? Maybe these individual creature societies are as confused as we are. How about that? And so when you say maybe, and as you say, well, what if they arrived and they are missionaries? That's a very powerful premise.
Well, it takes a very strong motivation to reach out and explore and go out into, in the case of our planet, much of the exploration was driven by a desire for wealth, but also by a religious zeal.
Yes.
Because it is very expensive to invest in something like that.
Well, and it is an astonishing thing. I mean, there may be, yes, as you say, searching for wealth, the 7 cities of gold, Tucson, Phoenix, Las Vegas, and also religious missionary zeal. And yet, I mean, I'm going to quote Aristotle here, human beings, mankind, by nature desires to know. We are, even on a good day, we're a curious bunch, we are.
We are, and in fact, Gene Roddenberry managed to convey that in the opening lines of Star Trek.
Yes.
Where he talks about what the goal of the 5-year mission was.
Yes.
One was to explore new worlds, encounter new peoples, and so forth.
Yes.
To go where man has never gone before. Of course, the more PC version of that would be where humanity has never gone.
Well,
before.
Exactly, mankind. We want to clean up our language, but as you say, to go where human beings and mankind, including men and women, have. And so, I think that this is worth engaging with in detail. And so maybe this is the point at which to do. Have you got an excerpt there?
Yeah, let me read you something from the beginning. And to set the scene, we have an aging astronaut who's dying of cancer who visits a professor of astrophysics. The professor begins recording his statement, and the astronaut begins by saying, "It started long before we went into space. I know you've heard about the flying saucer that crashed in Roswell, but let me tell you how that led to the formation of a group known as Majestic 12, and how they managed to keep a lid on everything. I'm not proud of the fact that my fellow astronauts and I let them muzzle us. You worry about your family and your reputation when you're young. I'm too old now to worry about those things. I outlived my only child, and I don't have much time left myself." And then it goes on.
Yeah.
But that sets the...
I see. Okay. And so, I got it. And so, as you say, the government hasn't been entirely straightforward. I'm now thinking about the movie rights to this novel, and maybe the show can put you over the top here. The premise is very powerful. It puts me in mind of 2 movies, of course, one of which is explicitly about aliens and empathy, and a famous science fiction writer, the name of Philip K. Dick. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which was made into the sci-fi movie Blade Runner, rather a violent but very engaging movie, with the young Harrison Ford playing the role of this bounty hunter who has to go around and take out of action. Now, actually, there weren't. I'm wrong. There weren't aliens, but there were in effect.
Androids.
Thank you. Androids, in effect, robots, who were so real and so creating so much mischief, according to some interpretation. They had to be neutralized, which is a euphemism for killed. And how do you know that they were androids instead of human beings? This is not a quiz.
Well,
they lacked empathy.
They lacked empathy. That's right.
There was an empathy test that had to be performed. And, and the reviews of the movie said, hey, nice try, guys. In this movie, the androids are more empathic than the human beings. The humans lack empathy. The androids have got the empathy. So, and one may interpret that variously. So when we make contact, empathy may or may not be relevant, right? I mean, language is going to be relevant. How do we communicate?
Well, let me turn that around and ask you as moderator this.
Yeah.
I mean, since you spend a lot of time thinking about empathy, as I've written, it strikes me that humans treat the animals on this planet, the ones who are lower on the food chain, remarkably different based on how they look.
Yeah.
If an animal strikes us as cute,
yeah,
whether it be a cat or a dog,
koalas,
or
at
koala,
the top of the list.
Exactly.
Yeah,
we give those animals human traits, and we think of them in human terms.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And on the other hand, if an animal happens to have the misfortune of having a face that's not particularly attractive, a possum is a good example.
Yeah.
Then we feel no remorse at all if it turns out to be roadkill.
Yeah.
Right? And the same thing is true with rodents of all kinds. In fiction, if you read about a character who's described as having a rat-like face or rodent-like features, it's never a good thing.
Yeah.
So, and there's no empathy for those animals.
It raises the bar. It definitely raises the bar. Yeah.
So,
and we're not very kind to animals, period. I mean, even those that look fairly well, we put them on greeting cards, and then I mean, I don't want to be too judgmental.
There's a well-known book out now about the sixth extinction.
Yes.
And it has to do with the fact that we are depopulating or
yes,
denuding the world of other.
Well, indeed. Nice point. I mean, human beings are a very, very tough species. And I mean, in many ways, humans are wounded in certain interesting and engaging ways that make us very challenging for ourselves and for anyone who comes into contact with us. And I agree. I mean, it's a big issue and very confronting from an empathic point of view. I don't have an easy. I mean, you didn't actually ask a question, but I see the. I see the challenge. I see the challenge.
No, my point, Lou,
yeah.
I guess my point is that when we look at how we will be treated by a different intelligence, you have to understand that it may not necessarily feel any empathy at all for humans. Just as we feel no empathy when we look at insects or other creatures.
That's right. It's a high bar. I mean, it's a high bar. I would agree, we have essentially zero empathy for insects.
Yeah.
On the other hand, there was this animation. Was it Pixar or Disney, in which, of course, the ants and the insects and the butterflies and the praying mantises, I think the praying mantis got a kind of heavy bad guy role, were made to look human.
And then we also had one about bees with Jerry Seinfeld, but for the most part.
Yeah, it reinforces your point, because at first they had to be made human-like and dear and cute,
exactly.
Right? And they were insects by name. But we solved that. The animators solved that problem, right? And then they were facing similar challenges, of course, that human. So we do. I mean, we're projecting, right? This is not empathy, but it's a part of empathy. We project, and when contact is made, I want to get back to your work, Stan, because you're the special guest here and have a lot to teach us. When contact is made, there's going to be a whole hierarchy of challenges, and one of them is going to be one-on-one relatedness, right? I mean, alien love. Can we say maybe all love is alien at some level, at some time or another? So it has rich metaphorical possibilities. Nevertheless, in the context of your narrative, is it boy meets girl?
What I try to do with this book, which makes it kind of different, is so much of science fiction, in a way, is directed at adolescence.
Yes.
So what I tried to do in this book really was to write an adult, mature science fiction novel. I mean, you probably would have to rate it probably R.
Okay.
It's an adult science fiction novel. It deals with serious issues. It also deals with love between a human and a female that he assumes to be human, who is human, in many respects, but physically, but is not really human. I mean, the bipedal form is got a number of advantages, and it while there are other types of aliens that are very likely, it's just as likely that you may see a bipedal form of alien. So, and that's why I said in some ways this book is a cross between the movies Casablanca, which is a love affair, obviously, and Star Wars.
Yes.
You are dealing with aliens, and some of them are not friendly.
And so, I mean, in Casablanca, this is a Humphrey Bogart story, I believe 1943-ish, right? Nobody knows whether the Germans are going to win. Casablanca is in North Africa. Humphrey Bogart, a man's man under some interpretation, meets Ingrid Bergman, a very lovely woman. They've had an affair in Paris. Providing context. Part of the challenge is to provide a context for the conversation, and then all hell breaks loose, and he has some tough choices to make. So listen,
right.
We're coming up. Yeah, go ahead.
At the end, there is some question as to what she will do and what her motivation is.
Yeah.
Will she remain with her husband, or will she go with Rick?
Right. It's down to the wire there. And we're going to have some further quotes from Casablanca and Alien Love both. We're coming up on a sponsorship break. And so when we come back, Stan, we have a couple of possibilities. Another quotation from Alien Love. I'd also like to talk about the writing process. You're, in addition to being a futurist and a autopsy assistant and telecommunications chairman, you're obviously a talented author. And it might make sense to mix it up and say what makes a good mystery. So, ladies and gentlemen, my special guest today is Stan Schatt, futurist, author, all-around Renaissance man. We'll be right back.
For further details, see Lou on the web at louagosta.com. That is spelled Louagosta, or phone 773-203-0269. Again, louagosta.com, or phone 773-203-0269. You are listening to A Rumor of Empathy. To reach Lou Agosta or his guest today, please call in to 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. You may also send an email to arumorofempathy lou@gmail.com. Now, back to the program.
Hi, this is Lou Agosta, and welcome back to the show. My special guest today is Stan Schatt, futurist, technologist, and author. Before the break, we were talking about Stan's latest novel, or one of his latest novels, Alien Love, a grown-up story, a story for grown-ups, not merely for teens and adolescents, about first contact with life forms from beyond our solar system. And so, Stan, among other things, you're a writer. I wonder, would it make sense to start off with another quotation or excerpt from Alien Love and then get into talking about the writing process?
Sure. Happy to do that.
Green light.
Yeah. So the female alien is named Cassandra. That's the name she's using, and she's talking to Jack, who turns out to be the hero of this novel. And she indicates that Stephen Hawking said that we shouldn't alert aliens that we're here. So Jack says, so when you think of aliens, you think Independence Day and not E.T. That seems kind of cynical for a scientist. And Cassandra says, I'm just saying that real life may not be like a movie that ends happily in 2 hours with the humans defeating the horrible-looking aliens. Maybe the aliens are more complicated than can be explained in a 2-hour movie. Think about their appearance. The aliens in so many movies look alike, short, gray, with huge eyes. Look at all the birds and insects. Why assume the universe is so bland? He says, okay, say you're right, and the aliens come in all shapes and sizes. What would they want here? Our water and precious metals? And she says, how would I know? Maybe different aliens want different things.
Yes.
And he says, you mean they're not all here for our women? And Cassandra stared at Jack with her mouth open in surprise. What would they want with Earth's women? He says, I don't know. In most of the science fiction movies I've seen, it's the women that the aliens want to kidnap and take back with them. Cassandra laughed. Maybe that's because all the aliens in the movies were males. Well, you just stop there.
Nice point, but drum roll there. Well, that's right. Relating is complicated, and so yeah, I'm enrolled. So you are a writer. Our audience is endlessly fascinated by the creative process, as am I, and as are most people. You've written a variety, fiction and nonfiction. This particular Alien Love is, for want of a better term, science fiction. But you've also written mysteries.
Mm-hmm.
Pick one. Tell the listener about how do you write? What comes up? What happens?
Yeah. Well, first of all, every time you write, the first thing that comes down besides what are you going to write about is what genre are you writing in? There are certain ground rules for every genre, just as there. I've had a number of different careers, and there are certain ground rules for every career, certain rules that you're expected to follow, so forth.
Well, it seems like you're good at quickly mastering those rules. I just call that out.
I think for whatever reason, I have been able to do that. But take mysteries, for example. People expect certain things in a mystery. For number one, they don't want to have a Deus Ex Machina at the end. They don't want to have suddenly, at the very end, some person who wasn't even mentioned in the entire novel turns out to be the one who did the killing.
Right.
That's breaking a rule. What people want in a mystery is they want there to be clues that they can follow, and they can play along with the detective or whoever is in the book and see if they can guess who the killer is or the villain is before the protagonist does. And if the mystery is crafted effectively, even if they don't, they'll go back and they'll look at all the clues that they missed, and they'll appreciate them, and they'll they'll conclude that the novelist did a good job. The book actually works. It's systematically.
My association is reverse, double reverse, right? That's the sort of rule is you should be able to figure out who done it, who did it, right? But that you almost want to be surprised.
Usually there are red herrings, and usually there is, a suspect at the beginning who looks obvious and turns out not to be. But sometimes there's a double reverse, as you mentioned. Sometimes a mystery writer can present the actual villain initially, and then make it appear that the person is not the one you want. And only at the end do they discover something that makes it clear that he indeed was the right suspect. So there are different ways of playing that game, but you do have to play by the rules. Now, I did something which is more difficult. I wrote what's called a paranormal mystery.
Yeah, say more about that. Paranormal.
Yeah, paranormal mystery means you've got some things in there that cannot be explained by science, right? In this case, there's an apparition. But you still have
apparition,
to play by
a key term. And paranormal means like, for example, extrasensory perception, ESP, whatever that is.
Things that cannot right now be explained by science.
Yeah.
But my point is that even if you include something like that, you still have to play by the rules, which means that you can't have, let's say, a ghost or somebody solve the mystery, or see things that we don't see. It still needs to be solved by good old-fashioned logic.
Indeed.
Otherwise, then why is the detective banging his head against the wall? Why not just ask the ghost who did it?
Well, you can ask, but somehow the ghost has got to be such that even there are some obstacles there, right? I mean, I'm noticing a pattern here, and I think it's a powerful pattern of issues around communicating. And, it's not exactly, empathy in the narrow sense. As you know, I'm interested in the subject. But how do people get across to one another in situations of otherness? The extraterrestrial is other, the ghost is, or the paranormal phenomenon, right? It's not like somebody wearing a sheet, I presume, is other. It's way different. Otherwise known in plain English as, way different than my experience.
Right, and even in the science fiction book, the aliens obviously communicate, but they're coming from different places, clearly. So, in fact, the same thing with the supernatural being. You don't really know what's behind what they're saying. You're never really sure. So that's what makes it kind of interesting, and in some way that's true of real life. You talk to somebody you meet. You don't really have a way of gauging just how accurate what they say is true, and you don't really know what their motivation is in saying certain things, right?
Yeah.
So
you have no clue. Would be sometimes. We begin by assuming.
If you're married over a period of time, you come to understand your spouse, and you can kind of understand where he or she's coming from. But when you're talking to somebody you've just met, you really have no clue at all. So, when you study literature, they always talk about the unreliable narrator.
Yes.
So, when a person's narrating a story, is he telling you the truth? Is he telling you only the truth as he sees it, or, is it real?
Well, that's right, and that's fascinating because there's a whole continuum, there's a whole set of things, that the narrator is making this stuff up, whole cloth, that he or she, the narrator herself, doesn't know the facts, right? Or sometimes, I'm having a lot of free associations here, Stan. I'm going to share one of them with you, right? In some of the Sherlock Holmes, mystery stories, those are mystery, right? And sometimes murder mystery. Yeah. People end up dead and so on. And the jewels are stolen, or there's blackmail. A lot of blackmail is going on. Holmes gets a letter, which he looks at. And he doesn't reveal the contents of the letter for, another 10 pages or something. Now, he's got access to that information, but the reader does not. An unfair advantage, one might say. I'm making this up, of course, as I go along here. So what I'm getting to kind of want to give it back to, maybe the writing process is driven by these information asymmetries that somebody, the other knows or doesn't know something, and the narrator knows or doesn't know something. And the writing process itself, I don't know if this is how, I'm just speculating, right? That you think about what are the logical consequences, or what are the probable, or what are the different scenarios that come up out of this?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure about that, but I can tell you that, in the old days, 100 years ago, people liked to read things written by an omniscient author.
Yes.
The author knew everything in the world, and he told you everything. So he would say, "Dear reader, let me tell you what's going to happen," and then it happened, and people were comfortable with that. But maybe the world has become less ordered and more uncertain, and so we really don't. We consider that approach to be old-fashioned. Nobody really does it anymore, and so it's different now. I also write. Sometimes I write a thriller. A thriller is different in that in a thriller, the reader knows things that the hero doesn't know.
Yes.
So it's not so much a mystery because the reader knows. And so what you do is that what creates the tension is the fact that you worry whether or not the hero is going to get killed, because the author's been telling you about this very, very smart villain who is going to sneak up on him.
Right.
So you know who the villain is, and you know what he's doing. You just don't know whether or not the hero's going to survive or not.
That's right.
But in the writing process, as I started to say at the beginning, first of all, you have to know what territory you're going in terms of, what the rules are. What the readers expect in a certain type of book. Now, in science fiction, you have a lot more leeway in the sense that you can pretty much write about anything except, you can write about anything. The reader has to kind of accept the beginning premise. When you pick up a science fiction book, you're told that there's time travel. You just kind of have to accept that. Now, there are forms of science fiction, hard science fiction, where the readers tend to be more technical, and they really expect you to explain any technology that's different than what we have today. It has to be theoretically possible.
Yes.
So that makes it a little more challenging.
Well, it does put me in mind of a paragraph or snippet from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy when they're explaining the improbability drive, which enables the characters to get from one place in the universe to another. And at a certain point, it requires these. By the way, I want to say, was it Douglas Adams? He was very British at certain moments.
Yeah. It was.
Maybe you can fill it. Maybe you can, provide the punchline. Once again, this is not a quiz. Improbability drive required. A warm. Yeah,
I can't think of the line, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, a really hot cup of tea. to get it started. So if I have to explain the joke, it's not funny. Okay, but the British have jokes about tea.
But what I'm trying to say is that even something like turn on the warp drive.
Exactly.
There are people who take offense to the idea of warp, and you have to kind of explain how that actually will take place and so forth. So it depends on the type of science fiction you're writing. But so first of all, you have to have the territory staked out in terms of what the rules are, and then you have to start with the characters. And a lot of novelists believe that everything starts with the characters. You have to have interesting characters, or there's really no story, and there's no reason for someone ever to read the book a second time if the characters aren't interesting. So one of the challenges for a writer is to actually create characters, even minor characters, who are realistic and three-dimensional.
Yes. And who we care about, and who we want to care about, right?
Just saying that a character's fat doesn't really convey. And why are they fat? Do they have an eating disorder because they're nervous, or this or that, or were they abused as a child? You try to find some kind of context so that the characters have complex, feelings and motivations. And so what a lot of writers do, and I've done this to some extent on occasion, is you develop some characters, you kind of think about these characters, then you have them interact with each other, and maybe you write a portion of where you're going. I read a quote from Daniel Silva. Daniel Silva is a writer who writes about a famous Israeli assassin for the Mossad called Gabriel Alon. I don't know if you've read any of his work.
I'm fascinated by it, and I have to ask you at this point, we want to continue on this, to hold the thought, Stan, because we're coming up on a sponsorship break. So we're going to go to that, and when we come back, I want to hear about the assassin's assassin. And there's some interesting ways of killing people that you know about as a futurist. Not exactly, this is once again fiction, of course, which we want to engage. And so, ladies and gentlemen, my special guest today is Stan Schatt, futurist, author, Renaissance man. We will be right back.
You are listening to A Rumor of Empathy. To reach Lou Agosta or his guest today, please call in to 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. You may also send an email to arumorofempathy@gmail.com. Now, back to the program.
Hi, this is Lou Agosta, and welcome back to A Rumor of Empathy. My special guest today is Dr. Stan Schatt, futurist, technologist, science fiction author, mystery author, thriller author, author of authors. And I want to give a shout out for those of you to get his writings, SCH, as in Stan, Cat, Henry, ATT, Stan Schatt, and look for Alien Love, about to come out or recently published, A Bullet for the Ghost Whisperer. And so welcome back to the show, Stan. Before the break, we were talking about Daniel Silva and assassination.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that he told an interviewer once that he kind of plots the first third of a book, and then he lets the characters interact. And since his books deal with an assassin, there are all kinds of interesting ways to kill people. But I don't really need him to tell me, because I spent many years as a futurist covering various technologies, and it's a goldmine when it comes to coming up with effective means of killing somebody so subtly that the detective can't figure out how it was done.
Well, I mean, and this is ripped from the headlines, too. Say more about that. I mean, and all the necessary disclaimers apply. We're writing fiction, mystery novels, and so on.
It's not a how-to, but yeah. Homeland actually used one of the ones that I had come up with a while ago, and that has to do with the fact that I used to be an expert on wireless technology, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, whatever, and a lot of the medical devices today are controlled wirelessly. And the reason for that is that that way doctors can monitor them and also, subtly adjust them when they need adjusting.
Well, that's right. I mean, and that's a great advantage. The patient or the client doesn't have to go into the office, get in the car. With telecommunications, it can be done remotely.
Right. I have a relative who had a pacemaker put in, and he happens to be a software engineer who works on printers. Mm-hmm. And he said he had the oddest feeling when the doctor came up to him and put this little gizmo over his chest and was adjusting his pacemaker, wirelessly. Because he said he does a similar thing with his printers, he can control them wirelessly.
Well, it is truly remarkable. I mean, the future is here, right? I mean, and you ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah, so So, anyways, nowadays one device that is very useful is an insulin pump that can be placed inside somebody and control the insulin intake for people, diabetics who need this.
Yes.
It's a wonderful thing because they don't have to keep giving themselves shots all the time. So the danger, of course, is that none of these devices were developed with any kind of security. There isn't a little lock. There isn't a little lock on the the Wi-Fi channel or Bluetooth channel. So it would be relatively easy for somebody to actually hack into it and actually increase the insulin dose, and somebody would die of an insulin overdose. And I think the odds are probably 99.999% to one that the coroner would attribute the death to simply a malfunction of the medical device.
Isn't that something? I mean, and so this is quite a premise for a thriller.
Right.
The perfect crime, right?
If
quote
it were
unquote.
a mystery, you wouldn't know. If it were a thriller, you actually would see the villain coming with his little wireless device, and let's say a character you cared about was on the operating table there.
Yes.
And the tension would mount because you'd wonder if the detective or the hero would get there in time to stop this guy from, sending his wireless message.
From doing his wicked mischief in this case.
Exactly. And, probably if it were a TV show, there would be a commercial just before the critical moment there.
We should have worked that into today's programming, but we'll keep that in mind. And so, I mean, new ways of killing people, not only in murder mystery novels. I mean, this can be very confronting, and other way. I mean, so this is the perfect crime. Thank you for the correction there. If it's a thriller, the audience or reader knows something that the character in the story doesn't. Whereas if it's a mystery, sometimes.
Right.
The reader doesn't know. It's by design.
Right. Now, a lot of modern, a lot of detective stories, mysteries now are making use of the latest science advances, which includes DNA.
Yes.
So when I wrote Silent Partner, one of the major themes has to do with sexual identity, and one of the characters happens to be transgender. Now, when that character has a sex change operation, when the detectives start looking for the villain, they have some blood, they do some DNA analysis, and lo and behold, they know that they are looking for a woman. Unfortunately, they're not going to find a woman because the woman has become a man.
Yes.
So it raises some issues. Similarly, I have a relative who had a bone marrow transplant. And one of the things that I discovered, which I will probably make use of in a future novel, is that it changed his blood type. Because since he used someone else's bone marrow, that person had a different blood type. And so the blood cells that are being produced for him now are this new blood type. So there are all kinds of, advances in science that can be reflected in fiction and present all kinds of, fascinating possibilities.
Well, let's go there. I think of all of the people I have met in the past, I don't know, 20 or 30 years, you are one of the most qualified to literally be a futurist and to have a grasp of how current technology plays into the future and what's coming at us. I suppose we should also call out people like Ray Kurzweil at this point, but you make the short list, that's for sure. What do you see as happening in the world? I don't know. Take it wherever you want. Run with the ball. We could start with writing, the future of the book, the future of technology on this planet.
Yeah. Well, I've read a lot of books about Kurzweil and about some of his theories, and as well as his. And he's probably right that the singularity is coming very soon. That we're going to have we're going to actually create artificial intelligence with consciousness. The timeline for that, most experts think, are within the next 25 years. So that would mean that you create an artificial intelligence that actually is aware of itself, actually has consciousness. And once you do that, of course, then as far as Stephen Hawking is concerned, and some others, you really are in a very dangerous spot. Because if you have artificial intelligence with its own consciousness, then the question is, does it have any morality? How does it view mankind?
One might ask.
Isaac Asimov tried to get around that issue by simply creating his rules for robots, the laws of robotics.
Yes.
You can't destroy a human, you can't do anything to hurt a human, but it's more complicated than that when it comes to trying to deal with an artificial intelligence. Do we really want some amoral intelligence judging us and coming to some conclusions as to whether humanity is really needed anymore?
Well, this is very confronting and very dynamic. I mean, empathy tells us what the other is experiencing, and morality tells us what to do about it, right? And so once we have consciousness, it's a whole new ball game. And I suppose we haven't actually defined our terms. You got a short definition of consciousness, Andy, here?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I'm using it in the same way that we use it with newborn humans, where they have to get to a certain stage for them to actually separate themselves from their environment, realize they are a unique person,
and so presence
and understand that they are alive, right?
Right,
and that they have their own personality, their own being.
Presence to a world. Right. There's a world. I am present to a world. It may be more dreamlike or like what a higher mammal is experiencing, maybe with or without language.
Yeah,
experience
I exist. I exist as a separate entity.
Okay, got it.
So that's one of the major, obviously the major breakthroughs in the next couple decades, I think, and there are some writers who are optimistic. They'd like to believe that we will be co-partners. We will be partners from that point on and work together. In fact, there are some who even speculate that there will be laws written into the Constitution guaranteeing rights.
Yeah, that would require at least an act of Congress and then some. So Congress would actually have to be able to get something done. But we can't go there right now. We actually have about 2 minutes left on and we do have to stop on time. Final thoughts. I invite your final thoughts on what are you working on next, whatever you'd like to say.
I'm finishing up a couple projects. One is a book about Daniel Silva, the writer about the Israeli assassin Gabriel Alon. And that's a reader's guide, and that'll probably be available in the fall. I also have written a book with my granddaughter called Jane Blonde, International Spy, which is a tween mystery.
A tween mystery. It sounds like fun for teenagers.
Well, a mystery, for teens, and it's about a girl who has a number of friends, including a fat nerd and a boy with Asperger's syndrome, and how they all work together to solve a mystery.
Well, I look forward to seeing and getting my hands on these books and more, Stan. We are out of time. I express my profound, sincere, enthusiastic. This show has been stimulating, maybe overstimulating. I can get overstimulated. It's been really great mixing it up with you. My special guest today has been Stan Schatt. technologist, futurist, author. Be sure to check him out on Amazon, Schatt. Next week, we're going to have an exciting show in which I'm going to continue the conversation about my empathy tips and techniques. Look forward to seeing you then. Have a great week. Signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to A Rumor of Empathy with Lou Agosta. Please join us again next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel. We hope to see you again next week.